So we live in a world of people who suffer from mediocre love. Like, can you imagine what the world would be like if you woke up every morning thinking that you want to love somebody in such a beautiful way that it inspires them to be the best version of themselves? Like, how would that change who you are and how you show up? The quality of your relationships is a direct correlation to the quality of your life. I think it's great to look at love as a skill set. You need to work at it and you need to practice it and you need to develop the skills. And that means that a lot of things, especially if you don't have a natural knack for it, you're going to have to suck at it for a while before you become excellent. I don't know anybody who's ever been on their deathbed and said, I wish I would have worked one more day. People on their deathbed, what they want is they want more time with the people that they love.
This is Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey Dream Drivers, welcome to episode 148 of the Dreams and Drive podcast. And today our guest is Nate Bagley. Do you believe that you, yes, you, that you can have extraordinary love? What about extraordinary relationships? And on this episode, we're going to talk to Nate, who's a podcaster, entrepreneur, writer, speaker, teacher, and a guy who just really loves his wife and wants to be the best husband in the world. He spends nearly every waking hour of his life trying to rid the world of mediocre love. He loves helping people create amazing relationships and is excited to share some of what he's learned with all of you. So whether you're in a romantic relationship or not, Nate's teaching, experience, and tips can be applied to almost any type of relationship. Because as a dream driver, learning, studying, and practicing the core fundamentals of communication, trust, respect, and understanding will take you far. So this episode is going to be a treat. Nate and I actually go way back to 2015 when I interviewed him on my Brandmakers blog, and I actually have a clip of that audio at the end of the episode, so make sure you stay until then. So for this week's giveaway, we are going to be giving away Steve Harvey's book, Jump. Now, I'm currently reading this book, and it is so inspiring, so motivating. I love hearing about Steve's story, and if you guys haven't seen that infamous video that he did, that's called Jump, go Google it. Watch it. If you want to enter to win a copy of Jump, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/win. That's dreamsanddrive.com/win. As always, please make sure that you are following us and sharing on social. We are Dreams and Drive across the board on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our show notes are available at dreamsanddrive.com. And if you want to grab some merchandise, whether it be a t-shirt, a hoodie, or a crew neck, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/shop and use the code DRIVER for 10% off. All right, let's get into this episode and let's learn how we can start transforming our relationships. Hi, Nate. Welcome to this episode of Dreams and Drive. I'm so excited to have you on today.
I'm excited to be on today. Thanks for having me.
No problem. As we were talking before we got started, I interviewed you 3 years ago for my Brandmakers series on my blog, rainacampbell.com. So it's so fun that we are meeting again, right? But this time on the podcast. Yeah, and your podcast, I tell my audience this all the time. So it'll probably be cool for people who remember. Your podcast was the first podcast I ever listened to, and I was hooked.
Really?
I was hooked. Yes. I forgot how I stumbled across you. Because I think, what was it, when I graduated, maybe 2013, 2014, podcasts weren't really popular. People had them, but they weren't as popular as they were today, right? And it was easier for me to listen to your podcast instead of reading your blog when I was at work, because people would see that I was reading through the blog. So I would just, press play on the SoundCloud link and then listen.
That's awesome. I love it. I've listened to a bunch of your episodes, but I didn't know that my show was the first one that you'd ever listened to. That's so wonderful. What a great story.
It's interesting too, because I have this fascination with storytelling, right? And I think that relationships are the core part of our stories. And maybe that, maybe you were an early inspiration to me really getting deep with people and figuring out how they built their lives. And, you just were really, really connected with your subjects. And that's something that really inspired me.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I can be connected to you during this interview too. I'm really excited to chat with you.
So I like to go back in time, right? I think it's really important for us to reflect on who we were as children. If I could say, how was the 8-year-old Nate? What was inspiring you as a child?
Oh, at 8 years old, I loved to read. I loved art. Like I like to draw and kind of create things. And I think I really loved Mr. Rogers and the Muppets. I remember I was probably around that age too when I got my first Walkman. Do you know what a Walkman is?
Yeah, I know Walkmans, like the Sony Walkman. Good. You put your little cassette tape in, you put your headphones. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the first cassettes I ever owned were the Beach Boys and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. And I wore those. I wore that Beach Boys album, especially. I wore that out so hard. Listening to Kokomo and Surfing USA. Still love those songs. But that was a lot of my childhood. I think I did a lot of creating. I remember even to this day, like I still fantasize what it would be like to be like, if I had a dream job, I would be a Muppet.
A Muppet? I've never heard that one before ever.
I think that'd be so fun to embody this, not only to just embody this character that brings so much joy to the world, but, and to entertain, but to be able to have this alter ego and have this, love of the writing of the Muppets. I think it appeals to both kids and adults. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really unique art form. I just kind of have a special place in my heart for the Muppets because of how much I watched them when I was a kid, and I still really love them.
Isn't it interesting how a lot of those childhood movies that we love, when you watch them as adults, you're like, wait, what were they talking about? Were we watching this and were we interpreting this, as children? But think along that same lines then, Nate, what was the dream back then? I know you said you wanted to be a Muppet. Was there something else that you were envisioning, the older Nate being?
Yeah, I remember in elementary school thinking a lot that I was going to be an architect.
Okay.
I loved to draw like dinosaurs and buildings. And I remember doing a science fair project on the idea of perspective, like how things get smaller the farther away they get from you. And I loved that kind of artwork. So I thought I was going to be an architect and build things and create things.
What was the reality? What did you end up being when you, let's say by 20, how did that pan out for you?
Oh man, by 20, I had all sorts of, I had a lot of different jobs growing up all the way up into my 20s. I sold cookies and donuts at a bakery. I worked at those big 5-gallon water jugs that you have at your office that you put on the water cooler.
They come in and they refresh them every few.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I worked at a company that did that for a long time. When I was a teenager, I worked as a mattress delivery man. I've worked at software companies. I've worked at restaurants. I've worked in customer support. So I've been all over the map. But I think I started to settle into a career when I graduated college, and I did a lot of marketing and writing. I really liked creative writing. When I was in college, I was on the newspaper staff and took a lot of PR classes and communications classes. And then that's what I did for the first probably, 5 to 8 years of my career before I transitioned into this weird relationship space that I'm in now.
So let's talk about that restaurant job, because if I remember correctly, when we first spoke back in 2015, you told me about this. You were at your job working at a restaurant, and you had this epiphany moment. Do you remember it?
I do, of course. Your memory is impeccable.
No, I read the article before this.
Oh man, you totally got me. So I remember I worked at a company in Florida. I worked at the corporate office of Tony Roma's, and they're an international restaurant company, and I was managing their digital marketing, and it was a great job. I loved it. But for years I'd had this question plaguing me, this problem, I would call it, where I really, in the grand scheme of things, I wanted to eventually get married and have a family. But my dating life was really sucking and things were not working out. And so I assumed that because my relationships had the same pattern of just kind of fizzling out or burning out and not working out, that I was probably the common denominator. And so for a long time, I thought like if I really want to fix myself and really get into a great relationship, I should probably go talk to people who have amazing relationships. So I created this idea in my head of going and filming a documentary where I talk to all these couples to try and unlock the mysteries of true love. And I'd have this idea, and then it would leave my head, and then I'd get the idea again, and I'd go buy a microphone, and then it would kind of fizzle out, and then I'd go buy a camera a couple months later, and then it would fizzle out. And I kept convincing myself that I was going to do it by like buying stuff and telling other people that I was going to do it. But it would always, the ambition or the momentum would always kind of fizzle out, and I'd never really take action. And it had been a long time since I kind of had that voice in my head, the idea kind of come back. And I was having a particularly rough day at work and was just feeling a little depressed. And this guy walks into my office and goes, "Nate, man, you're looking really down. What's going on?" And I'm like, I've got, all this work stuff going on and I'm stressed out. And he said, "Dude, at the end of the day, all we're doing here is selling lunch and dinner to people. You got to stop being so stressed about it. It's not that big a deal." And I had this existential crisis. I was like, that's what I'm doing with my life. I was like 27, I think. And I'm like, that's what I'm doing with my life. I'm selling lunch and dinner to people. Like, is this what I want to be doing? And that voice came back and it was like, "Nate, remember me? Remember this cool idea that you had?
Were
remember
there cameras
how
and mics dancing around in the vision too?"
Yeah. And so I was like, oh yeah, I totally remember that. And it kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, I don't want to, what happens if I never have this idea again? Like, what happens if this idea leaves my brain and never comes back and I never get these answers? What would my life look like? And it freaked me out because I really did want to have I wanted to get married one day and I wanted to be an amazing husband. And it scared me that without finding answers to the questions that I had, that I would never be able to have that. And so I was scary enough that the thought of not getting those answers was scary enough, or not having this idea again, that I quit my job within the week and spent the next month selling all my crap and going to Disneyland a few times or Disney World, because I hadn't been since I'd lived there. And then I kind of, over the next few months, took off and started traveling the world or traveling the country at least, and interviewing couples and trying to figure out find the answers.
So I have a question that I always ask people when they tell these type of stories, right? And maybe because this is just reflective of my own personality. You weren't scared that things wouldn't work out, or like
I was terrified.
Okay, you were okay, because it takes so much courage, right? But at the same time, it's also very, very scary. Yeah,
I'm still scared. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, I had to just be really honest with myself and say, what's the worst that could happen? And the worst thing that could happen for me, I'm lucky. Some people's worst is a lot worse than my worst. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm really lucky to have a really supportive family. I have parents that would be able to, I'd be able to go live in their basement for a while I got back on my feet. Worst case scenario is I blew through all my money. I lost everything, and I went completely ran out of funds and energy and connections, and just couldn't continue to move forward. I was broke. Mm-hmm. And at that point I could go back and move in with my parents if I really needed to, or move in with a friend and get a job and build myself back up again. And I was like, that's it. That's the worst that could happen to me. The worst thing that could happen to me is I'd lose my money and I can make more money. Well, then why the heck not? Why not go for it? And there is that fear in the back of my mind that there's always that financial fear of someday the faucet's going to turn off, but it's worth the risk for me. You only live once.
Where do you think that desire to learn about relationships and how to, I guess that personal development aspect of just building better relationships, where did that come from? Because I feel like that's something that, we don't all prioritize.
No, I don't think we do. And I think we should. The more I studied it and became interested in it, the more I realized that the happiest people are the happiest people because they have the happiest relationships. The quality of your relationships is a direct correlation to the quality of your life. I don't think there's anything more important that I could be doing than helping people improve not only the quality of their relationships, but the quality of their life. I don't know anybody who's ever been on their deathbed and said, I wish I would have worked one more day. Mm-hmm. I wish I could have gone to one more board meeting. I wish I could have sold one more widget. No, there's books and all sorts of really interesting stuff written about this, that people on their deathbed, what they want is they want more time with the people that they love. And they want to just spend more time doing the things that they that they loved. To me, if I can help people live more of a life full of quality relationships and doing the things that they love, then I'm going to be a pretty happy camper, especially if I can practice what I preach.
So you embarked on this mission to find couples and to really learn about what takes or how do you make and sustain these lasting, loving relationships. What was the first hurdle that you faced in making this happen? Oh
man, the first hurdle was, it was all mental. My first hurdle was just being willing to show up at a stranger's house and interview, or actually a friend's house. My first couple interviews were friends.
Okay.
And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to get great audio quality. I didn't know how to interview. I didn't know how to, there's just a lot of things that I didn't know where to publish my interviews. I didn't know if anybody would listen. There was just a lot of fear of the unknown, not knowing what the next step should be. And I felt like I was just kind of a giant toddler running around the house, tipping stuff over.
That's how it always is in the beginning, though, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest challenge was being willing to suck at something before I was great at it. And I think a lot of creators and entrepreneurs, the reason they fail is because they're not willing to suck at something in order to become really great at something. And the same holds true for relationships. Relationships are an art form. We want a great relationship to just happen naturally. We think that if we just find the right person and have great chemistry with them, that chemistry is going to carry us through a lifetime of laughs and unicorn kisses and wonderful memories. And that's just not the case. Anything that's worth having, you have to fight to have. You need to work at it and you need to practice it and you need to develop the skills. And that means that a lot of things, especially if you don't have a natural knack for it, you're going to have to suck at it for a while before you become excellent.
I think I was reading or listening to one of your interviews where you talked about love being a language, right? And with all languages, you have to learn it. It's learned behavior.
Definitely. Whether you learn it as a newborn, a language as a newborn, or you learn it as an adult, you're just trying to pick up a new language, man, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of trial and error. You got to learn about, verbs and nouns and how to structure sentences and how to talk to different kinds of people and increase your vocabulary. And love is exactly the same way. I think we learn to love from the people that we grow up around, from our families, from our parents, from our friends, and a lot of the habits that they pass on, or maybe the dialect of love that they pass on, is unique. Did you grow up in New Jersey?
I grew up in New Jersey, and my parents are Caribbean. So yeah. I'm just saying that because they're crazy Caribbeans. Yeah.
So I grew up in Salt Lake City. And so even the way that we talk, and there's probably a bunch of words that you guys use in your house that I wouldn't know what they mean. Mm-hmm. And there's probably words that I would use in my house that you wouldn't know what they meant because of just the culture and the family that we were both raised in. And the same holds true for relationships and love. It's amazing how many things that we assume about our potential romantic partners or our romantic partners. We assume that they just get certain things. They understand the way that we're thinking, the way that we're feeling, the way that we're operating, and they just don't always speak the same language.
And I think a lot of us don't even realize that love is something that, the way we loved can always change, right? Because I think some of us think that, we're permanently doomed to experience love a certain way. And that's totally not true.
No. I think it's great to look at love as a skill set. In comparison to? A lot of people think it's a feeling. A lot of people nowadays say love is an action, and that's great. But I think love is kind of I would refer to it more as a skill set. There are tons of different skills if you want to become really great at love that you have to develop. Just like in business, there's a lot of different skills you have to develop. If you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to have a successful business, one of the things you need to know how to do is sell. You don't need to be an expert at it, but you need to, if you don't have something to sell, and we're going to probably talk about this later, but if you don't have something to sell, you're not going to make money. Whether it's a product or a service, you have to have a way of taking somebody's money in exchange for value. A lot of people are scared to do that. And it's a skill that you can develop. And some people are more naturally good at it than others. But inside of a relationship, there's a very similar analogy. A great skill would be conflict management, learning to listen to your partner, put yourself in their shoes, and then talk to them without being super emotional. The natural instincts of a person typically is to get really emotional if we feel like we're not getting our way. way, or if we're feeling threatened, or if we're feeling like we're being treated unfairly. But over time, if you put the practice in, you can develop the skill of selling, just like you can develop the skill of like maintaining control of your emotions when you're feeling threatened. So it's these little skills that you can acquire over time that make you an amazing lover and that make you an amazing entrepreneur.
So I know people are probably like bursting at the seams to really dive into this. But before we get into this, I want to just, quickly, just so you can position us along this journey. So you started Lovumentary, you were building a brand, let me ask you this. How did you start to build the brand, and, what kind of feedback were you getting that told you, wait, like this is something people are really finding valuable?
Honestly, it was just have you ever heard the Ira Glass quote where he talks about creating about your taste?
Say it and maybe I'll remember it.
So Ira Glass, I don't have the quote memorized. I'm going to paraphrase because there's a really cool video online about him. Do you know who Ira Glass is? He's the guy who hosts This American.
Mm-hmm.
He works for NPR. He's fantastic. He's probably, I would consider him like the godfather of podcasts. And
those were the big ones. This American Life.
Yeah. So back in he talks about his career in this clip, and he says, when I started out, I was terrible. And he plays some old clips of when he was just starting out in radio. He's like, listen to this. It's horrible. And then he goes into the quotable clip where he goes, you get into the craft because you have good taste. Like you right now, Raina, you have good taste, and that's why you have this show, because you know what a good show sounds like, and you know what a good interview sounds like, and you've heard them before. And so you have this amazing taste, and part of what you're doing when you're creating is you're trying to create something that matches or that lives up to your taste. Mm-hmm. But the only way, a lot of people, they create something and they go, oh, that doesn't measure up to what I deem is acceptable, and so they give up. But he said the only way to get your skills or your talents to match your taste, your impeccable taste, is to create a massive body of work. And over time, as you continue to create this massive body of work, your talent increases and your skills increase. And suddenly one day you wake up and you have everything that you need to form an audience and to create something amazing. And for me, that was the process is, if you go listen to my first probably 30 interviews, you can see the improvement, but I'm proud of them in the sense that I did them, but I listen to them and I kind of cringe a little bit.
That's how I am too. It's like, oh my God, why was I talking so much? Or why didn't I not let them talk? Or, why did I not edit that out? Things like that.
Yep. And in very large part, it's because you have it. That cringe comes because you have impeccable taste. And for those of you who may not have a podcast that are listening right now, like think back on your very first relationships and how you showed up when you were first dating, and like you held hands for the first time, or the first time you told a girl or a guy that you liked them and had a crush on them, and like how awkward you were and how not smooth you were. The first time you asked a girl to dance, or the first time you wanted to tell a boy you had a crush on him.
Your first kiss, you're just like cringe, like, oh my
God. and your teeth hit together, and it's like, maybe that was just me. I don't know. But like the awkwardness when you're doing something new is when you look back, the reason the awkwardness and the cringiness is there is because you know what you wanted it to be, but you didn't have the capacity to be there yet. So for me, the process was all about just continuing to create and create and create. And listen to my audience. And as people listened and said, wow, that really resonated with me, or that was a really important episode for me, I knew that I was on track. And sometimes people would give me feedback about like the length of an episode, or the direction that I took, or that I needed to shut up, or that I needed to talk more, or I needed to like direct the conversation a little bit more. And with that feedback, I've kind of learned and grown and developed. And I'm still not where I want to be, but I'm on the road. And now I'm less scared of sucking, because I know that the only direction I can really go is to get better.
So thinking about the first few years of Lovumentary, like what do you think were the top 3 things you learned about relationships? Because you went into it trying to better yourself and also just learn about how you can help other people. So what were some key things, 3 things that you knew these things are important?
The first thing we kind of already talked about is the practice. Mm-hmm. If you're unwilling to put in the practice, you're not going to develop the skills. And there's a lot of people who want the skills to magically appear for them, and they just don't. That's just not the way it works. If you want to truly have an extraordinary relationship, you got to be willing to confront the uncomfortable things. You got to be willing to look at yourself and your weaknesses and the areas where you may need work, and have conversations about them and acknowledge the fact that you're not perfect, and do the work to get better. A great example of this in my life right now, I got married about 18 months ago. And one of the things that was really hard for me straight out of the gate in my marriage was that my wife would get anxious. She would just worry about things. And I took it personally. And when she got anxious, I would get anxious about her being anxious, because to me, it was a reflection on my abilities as a husband. I felt like I was somehow letting her down, that she shouldn't be anxious, that I should make her feel safe, that I could somehow take her anxiety away. And if I couldn't do that, there was something wrong with me. And so my way of dealing with my anxieties was to try and treat her or force her to take care of her anxiety. I quickly learned that was just not the case, because then she just felt more anxious. She felt guilty for suddenly being anxious because I was being anxious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can totally relate with you in that one, because even like in a friendship sense, I'm that friend who, if I say, are you okay? And the person says, I'm okay, but I can see visibly that you're not okay. I'm like, are you sure you're okay? No, you're not okay. Tell me.
That's exactly what I would do.
I'm here
if you want to talk about it.
Yeah,
let's let it out. Just talk about it. And it would drive my wife nuts.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm an extrovert. I'm a talker. I'm like super emotional. And she's much more introverted. She likes to kind of like sort things out in her head and just say them once and be done with it. And I'm just like, let's just hash it out. Like, let's just talk about it. And we'll figure it out. And sometimes I was trying to do that when she wasn't ready, and it was making her even more anxious and making the problem even worse. And so this is a weakness that I have. It's something that wasn't working in my relationship. And so one of the things I've been having to do over these last 18 months is learn how to self-soothe, learn how to like be comfortable in the discomfort. Instead of like when my wife gets anxious, instead of freaking out and trying to fix everything, I have to take a deep breath and I go, honey, if you need anything, let me know. And then I step away and I go soothe. Like I go work out, I go talk to a friend, I take some deep breaths. I do whatever it is I need to do to get out of my anxious state, because I know it won't help her. The best thing that I can do is take care of myself in that circumstance. Yeah. And things have been getting way better, but that's just like one little glimpse into like one of the small things that I've had to do inside my marriage and really practice and focus on and work at in order for my marriage to be successful.
How did that help you in your business? And we haven't really talked about what you're doing now, so maybe you can just give us a quick rundown of the evolution of your brand and how that, how how this is all playing out into how you run your business.
Yeah. So I'm kind of just playing right now. So okay. When I got married, I took a year off, basically a year off to, I told my wife, like, I just want to be dedicated full time for a year to being a great husband. I don't want distractions. I don't want to get like, I don't want to lose focus on this. This is something that's really important to me. And so I stopped doing my podcast for a year, and I stopped writing, and I stopped creating, and I took a 9-to-5 job and just kind of rested for a little while. And after the year was up, my wife pulled me aside and she's just like, look, this is important to you. This relationship stuff is like, you're amazing at it. And I see when you get talking about it, like when you go to these conferences with these therapists, or when you go guest on a podcast or something like that, you come out just like on fire. And she's like, I can't be the one who stands in the way of your dreams. So I want you to quit your job and like, let's see if we can give you 6 months to a year of runway to figure out what's next for you.
Wow. You have an amazing wife. Wow.
My wife is incredible. And I know we're going to, I mean, we can talk about this as well, but like, there's something about having companionship and pursuing your dreams. Like I hear a lot of people make the excuse, like, I never want to get married because then I have to, like, kind of like you have to
sacrifice, right? Like,
don't
have kids. If you have kids, you'll never be yourself again. It scares people who want that. Or, you hear the ball and chain, like, oh, I got married and now my wife has a leash on me, or my husband won't let me do anything. He just won't let me have access to the money. I don't know. There's a million things that I've heard people talking about how marriage confines them and restricts them. And in my experience being in a relationship with my wife, honestly, I feel like my capacity has more than doubled. My ability to
affect people in the world, my creativity, the freedom that I have, the emotional stability that I have. Like, I feel more secure. It's all because I have this companion who believes in my dreams and I believe in hers, and we're supporting each other. And we might have to make temporary sacrifices every now and then that can be difficult, that we wouldn't have had to make if we were single. But in the grand scheme of things, the return on my investment is so, I feel like it's so obvious if you're in a great relationship that there's nothing better. There's nothing I would rather do with my life than be a husband to my wife.
I know people listening, and like me, I'm just smiling, like, cause that's just so beautiful to hear. And I feel like, especially coming from, I feel like our society, and I'm talking about Western American culture, right? Men having these type of conversations openly is not something that we hear a lot, right? It's always women leading the conversation, and it's always that perspective, but it's so good to hear it coming from a male perspective, because I think that inspires other males, but also inspires women that these are conversations that men want to have. It's just learning how to get that conversation started is what a lot of us are trying to do.
Definitely. And that's part of my mission. Like, I've never met a guy that was like, I want to be a mediocre boyfriend. I want to be a subpar husband. Most men out there want to be awesome. They just don't really know how, or they've never been shown the way, and they've never had somebody speak out and say, hey, this is it. Like, I figured this crap out, and I will show you everything that you need to do to be awesome at this. And that's part of what I feel is my calling. Is I want to rally. I want to rally awesome husbands. I want to rally the dudes who are like, yeah, I want that. I want to be an amazing husband to my wife, and I want to be a phenomenal father to my children. I want my kids to look at me and be like, yeah, I have the best dad in the world. And when my wife goes out to lunch with her friends, I want her to think, for me personally, I want her to think, oh my gosh, I am married to Nate freaking Bagley, you guys. Like, I so lucky. And instead of like complaining about, the laundry that gets left on the floor or the toothpaste on the mirror in the bathroom, she just feels so loved and taken care of and adored that she just feels like she's the luckiest woman on the planet. And I don't know a guy that I don't think I could find a guy that wouldn't want to be that under the right circumstances.
But a lot of guys, I don't want to turn this into men bashing, right? But I think a lot of men want that, but then at the same time, it's like, I think for women, especially like, let's say millennial woman now, there's this millennial curse, right? It's like, but why aren't guys acting like that's what they want, right? Or why is it so hard to find guys who are like this? I think that's something, I think communication, that's something that I know, like even in my own relationships, it's like, communication for me has always been like, how do you talk to someone in a way that, because let me back up a little bit. Because I grew up in like a Caribbean household, right? And I say this in the sense that like my mom, it was both my mom and dad like equally shared, responsibilities in the household. But like Caribbeans have this stereotype, especially of like women as being very domineering, right? And it's like, they're very independent. And when you talk to a man, it's like, tell him what you want and how you want it done, right? And it's like, it's hard for me to be soft sometimes. And I think sometimes when I talk to people, I always feel like what I want to say never gets understood the way I'm trying to say it, right? Like I could say, like, hey, maybe we should do this. I know you really like this. And it's like, why are you always trying to tell me what to do? And I'm like, I'm just recommending something. And I think that's something that our generation, especially us creatives, people who have dreams and who are really goal driven, sometimes it's hard to, and this can be across relationships, right? Sometimes it can be hard to learn how to communicate outside of that get it done mentality. Does that make sense? I think I just went on like
definitely learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it was great. I loved your rant. So I have so much that I want to say right now. So first of all, let me say you're right. It is difficult. And I think everybody is in a different place in their evolution as a human being. And some people have learned a lot about communication and have learned a lot about self-awareness. And some people are still on page one. One thing that I'm still teaching myself and reminding myself on a regular basis is that when people react out of anger or frustration, kind of like the situation you were talking about, why are you telling me what to do? It's almost always because they're hurt. People that anger and that kind of the attacking mode is almost always a response to your fight or flight mechanism. So what most people don't know is that the pain receptors in your brain that process physical pain, a lot of those same receptors are the ones that process emotional pain. We oftentimes react to an emotional threat in the same way that we would react to a physical threat, like a lion in the caveman days.
I never thought about that.
So sometimes when your safety or your security or your identity is being threatened, rather than like calmly contemplating, why am I having this reaction right now? The actual instinct, the DNA level instinct is to lash out and protect yourself, sometimes in anger, sometimes in like violence. And I'm not making an excuse for behavior. I think everybody needs to be responsible for their behavior, but I think one of the first steps is understanding why you behave a certain way. And so when people react that way, I think it helps to understand that they're being threatened, because what often happens is when they respond in a negative way, it triggers our fight or flight mechanism. Yeah. And then we pick a
whatever,
fight.
Bye.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said it anyway. Never mind. Right. That's
another thing that I've been working on in my marriage is identifying like, oh, my wife is reacting this way. I need to take a deep breath and just say, hey, it looks like you're having a really negative response to the thing I just said. And maybe I wouldn't say it this like
so
sterilized, but I'd be like, babe, it looks like I hurt your feelings and I really didn't mean to. So I'm going to give you a minute to cool down and then we can talk about this later. It like de-escalates the situation immediately. And they go, oh yeah, you're right. You didn't mean to hurt me. Yeah, I'll take a minute and then we can pick this conversation up again. So like that's a skill that you could develop. That's a skill that anybody listening could develop. And it's an awareness that you can have that when people behave that way, it's almost always because they're feeling threatened or they're hurting or they're going through something. The other thing that I want to say to your rant that I thought was beautiful is one of the things that we tend to do as adults that really the more you think about it, the more mind-boggling it is. But as an adult who wants to be in a relationship, a lot of the times we think that we can get the behavior that we want out of our partner or potential partner by punishing them into submission. But the fact of the matter is that changing human behavior, like if there's a guy out there who's misbehaving, who's not treating you the way you want to be treated or not hearing you the way you want to be heard, punishing him isn't going to get you the result that you want. It isn't going to get you the outcome that you want. And if you think about the way that we treat kids, if a kid is learning to talk or learning to walk and they say a word wrong or they fall down, we don't scream at them and tell them that they're stupid. Or we don't talk about how disappointing they are because they can't even walk 3 steps without falling over.
Nobody would ever walk, right? We'd all be babies crawling around.
Instead,
for the rest of our lives.
What we do is we look at them and we go, oh, good job. You can do it. Just stand up. You can take a couple more steps. You can do it. I love you. Or when they try and say a word and they can't say their R's right or something like that, you go, you just roll with it and you help them get the pronunciation over years and years and years of practice. And eventually they'll be able to have like an entire vocabulary, or they'll be able to walk and run and play sports. And it's like this beautiful evolution. And what we do with kids is we reward the effort, not the outcome. When a kid puts in an effort to get something right, even if they don't get it right, we tell them, good job, good, keep trying. But when it comes to our romantic partners, like if they put in an effort and they don't give us the outcome that we want, we punish them and we get angry. So maybe a guy approaches you and he doesn't really do it in the most flattering way. Like how can we appreciate the effort without reprimanding him for the crappy result? Or maybe he asks you on a date and you're allergic to shellfish and he takes you to Red Lobster. And it's like you could destroy him and you could tell him he's a failure of a boyfriend, or that he doesn't remember anything and that he's stupid, that he forgot this one important thing about you that he just should always remember. Or you can just talk about how thoughtful he is and how wonderful he is to plan this amazing date and remind him and be kind and compassionate and caring about it. And I've found that the couples and the people in this world in life who focus more on appreciating their partner for the effort instead of reprimanding them when they don't get things right, they tend to bring out the best in their partner. And so I feel like there's a lot of, as millennials, there's a lot of men out there and there's a lot of women out there who might have a reputation for being crappy partners, but they've never really had anybody positively reinforce them for their efforts.
That is so true, Nate.
They've only had people complain about them for letting them down. And, once you've let enough people down, you feel like a failure. You stop trying.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it can often be like, I'm thinking about my own self, right? Like even growing up, I feel like within like my own parental relationships, it's always kind of been criticism as motivation methodology, if that makes any sense, right? Now me as an adult, I have to learn that maybe, Raina, that's not the way you want to go about life, right? Like that happened to me, but it doesn't have to be how I show up in the world from here on out.
Definitely.
And that's part of that self-awareness that you were talking about.
Yeah. And I think criticism has its place.
Yeah. But it doesn't always have to be like, oh, you can't do this, so maybe that will motivate you to do better. Like, no, it just turns you off from people.
And you see what you look for. I don't know. Have you ever played we called it the slug bug game growing up, but I don't know.
I think that's a Utah thing or where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from Utah.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we didn't play that in Jersey.
So this is the game. We'd be driving to grandma's house or something. And whenever you saw a Volkswagen Beetle on the road, you got to punch. I would punch my brother until he told me what color it was.
Oh, we did
Say,
punch buggy, no punch back.
You just hit him in the arm.
Oh no, we called it punch buggy, no punch back. That's what we did.
Punch buggy. Yeah, punch buggy. I would never ever see Volkswagen Beetles ever on the road. But the minute we started playing that game, they were everywhere. It's like every 30 seconds, there's a punch buggy and you're getting punched in the arm. It's like, where did this thing come from? I never see them on the road ever. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting to me that the moment you start looking for something is the moment you start seeing it. So if you're focused on seeing the good in people and the positive efforts that they're making, they'll show up all over the place. But the people who are looking for reasons to break up with somebody, or they're looking for reasons that their partner's a failure, or they're looking for reasons to be pissed off about something, they'll also find those reasons everywhere.
So how can, practicing these skill sets and having this way of looking at love and relationships impact our businesses and our ability to build brands?
I think a large part of that is just building self-awareness. Mm-hmm. Learning to be able to give and receive feedback, learning how to work with other people, learning how to understand your customers and what really resonates with them. Like the skills that you build inside of a relationship translate across business so easily. You've heard me making all throughout this entire episode analogies between business and relationships. And I don't think there's really anything that you could learn. I was going to argue sex, but I think sex is even a business.
Really? Why? Why do you think that? I
mean, it's one of the oldest professions, right?
Okay, you mean business as in, okay, some people do use it as a profession. Is that what you meant? Yeah. Or do you just mean the way we react? Like it's like we're exchanging, like, I guess we're just trying to understand what you mean by that.
No, there's just a way, just about anything that you learn or develop inside of a relationship is going to find some way to translate over into business, I think.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's get back to that story, right? Your wife said, "Hey, honey, you need to, put your dreams in drive," right? What did you do to get that going and to reignite the Lovementary brand and everything that you built from it?
Well, first thing I did was go back to writing and interviewing. So I relaunched the podcast recently, which I'm really excited about, and am actually dedicating an entire season to sex. I've got a sex therapist that is on board, and she co-hosts all the episodes with me. And we think it's a really important topic to talk about that a lot of people are really uncomfortable talking about. And so now we're able to help facilitate these conversations, and that's a lot of fun. And I've started writing again, and I just really, really love writing, and I'm just looking for ways to provide value. I feel like dollars follow value, and so far that's been proving to be the case. I've been doing some coaching, which has been really great, but now I'm getting really excited. I think I found a way to translate all the things that I'm learning inside relationships and my passion for marriage into the business sector. And so that's probably going to be the next thing that I'm really focused on over the next probably 6 months to a year is that little aspect of the business.
What makes you nervous, or what's a challenge that you're working through right now in building this all out?
So I'll tell you what the biggest challenge that I face is I'm a big believer that the majority of people have no idea how great their relationships can be. So we live in a world of people who I think suffer from mediocre love. Mm. And the thing with mediocrity is it's just comfortable enough to not be painful. And the thing about business is one of the best ways to generate business that people will pay you money is if they're in pain and you can help take their pain away. There's all these people out there who don't know how great life could be if their marriage were taken up a couple notches. They're completely ignorant to what that would look like. They're oblivious to it. So I've got this huge, massive group of people that I want to inspire to take action, but they're just comfortable enough that they don't feel the pain to be motivated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Like if you're on the brink of divorce, people like that call me all the time. They're like, oh, we need help. Our marriage it's falling apart. We're going to get a divorce next week if we can't get this figured out. Those people are in pain and they're willing to throw money at a therapist or a coach or somebody who can help them solve their problems. But I'm more interested in the prevention. I'm more interested in how can I help a huge group of people never, ever get to that place where they're even considering divorce? How can I make their life so happy and so wonderful that they're just like, marriage, this relationship is the best decision I ever made. And there's just this group of people who are just so comfortable being average that inspiring them to take action. They don't see the need. They don't see the need to like invest time, energy, or money in something that's working well enough that they don't want to like upset it.
Unless Beyonce or Kim Kardashian says they need to, right?
Exactly.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I was even thinking, I was just jotting down some notes here. It's like, well, where does that start, right? Like, is it something that even when you were talking about prevention, is it something that we need to be having at an elementary school level, right? Like, because when I was in elementary school, we weren't talking about relationships. That was grown people talk, right? You know, I think that it really can go back down to like education and making this part of our school systems, because I can see how in my own life, right? If I was able to learn about relationships in this sense, maybe the way I approach them in all types of relationships could be different, right? Maybe that could be a solution to a lot of the things that that we experience as we grow, you know?
I don't think you know how ingenious your comment just was. I have been having conversations with some really fascinating and wonderful and interesting people lately. And that's exactly what we've been talking about how great the world would be and what it is that we need to do to start teaching kids at a really young age all the skills that they need to be amazing husbands and wives and fathers and mothers. Mm-hmm. Like, what if starting in kindergarten, you got the basics, just like you get the basics of math, you get the basics of social skills and social awareness. Yeah. And you're taught negotiation and compassion, and you're taught how to manage your emotions, and you're taught kindness, but in a way that translates into relationships that will carry throughout the rest of your life. Yeah. I definitely think that would be, that would, working on a project like that would be a dream come true for me.
You never know. Maybe someone listening in has a connect that could help you make that happen. You never know. And you know what? And for people who are listening who may not, let's say they may not necessarily, I just want to make sure I do like that disclaimer. If you identify in other ways and maybe you don't want to be a husband or a wife, or maybe you call it partnership, or maybe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. We're not only talking about people who want these ideals. We're talking about all types of relationships. We definitely can apply it to all. One thing I want to say about you, Nate, as we wind down, is your emails are always on point. If you need to sign up for his emails. I read them all the way through, and they're long, right? Like,
yeah, I write long emails.
When it comes to marketing, so I know you said you worked in marketing, you studied marketing. Let's just do a quick 101. Like, one thing that you think anybody because marketing is actually building relationships with your customers or potential customers, right? Yeah. What's one big marketing tip you would give to our dream drivers listening in? If you're building a brand, you need to blank, blank, blank.
I would say if you're building a brand, you need to focus on what your message is and tell the story. To me, marketing is all storytelling. You know how I was talking a minute ago about people who are they don't realize their pain. They're stuck in mediocrity.
Yeah.
The way that I'm starting to discover to get them to respond is I have to tell them their own story. And when I tell them their story and they go, oh yeah, that's me. That resonates with me. You're telling me the thing that happened to me and my husband, or me and my wife, or me and my partner, me and my girlfriend last week. Then they start to tune in to, oh, this can be better. Yeah. If you want to be a fantastic marketer, you need to understand the story of your customer. And then you need to be able to tell your customer their story back and offer relief to their pain or an enhancement to their life.
And on that note, when you say story, right, can you tell us, as you've interviewed a lot of amazing couples and learned a lot of things, I know we can get deep here, but maybe just tell us the surface level takeaway. What's the takeaway that you've had from a couple you've interviewed, and how has it affected you?
Oh, man.
I know you have a lot, right?
Yeah, I do have a lot. But the one that comes out is one of my favorite couples, Ty and Terry. And Ty and Terry lived in Omaha, Nebraska. And there was this point where we were actually, do you mind if I pull up the quote so I don't get it wrong?
Yeah, fine. I edit these, so if you have to pause, it's no problem.
Okay, so I'm talking to Ty and Terry in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm sitting at their kitchen table and hearing about this amazing relationship that they've had over the years. And I was with my friend Melissa, and one of us asked them, like, how did you create a relationship like this? How is this so incredible? And Terry said this thing that just has always stuck with me. And this is a direct quote from her.
Okay.
She said, "At the end of Ty's life, I want him to be able to say, Terry was the greatest earthly blessing in my life, the best thing that ever happened to me, and that I'm a better man because of how she loved me. That's the goal I live with every day. That is how I want to love this man."
Oh my gosh.
And I had never in my life considered what it would be like. Like, can you imagine what the world would be like if you woke up every morning thinking that you want to love somebody so in such a beautiful way that it inspires them to be the best version of themselves? Mm-hmm. Like, how would that change who you are and how you show up? And how would that change like the world, that the families that are in our communities? And when I understood Terry's goal and heard her say that, her goal as Ty's wife, it floored me. And I was like, that is a goal that I can strive for. I want to be able to love my future wife in a way that makes her feel the same way, that like with her dying breath, she looks back and says that I'm a better woman because of how Nate loved me.
What do you tell couples who, let's say one partner is the one who wants that and the other one hasn't yet realized that they could achieve that? Right? Because I feel like that's what a lot of people, like there might be one person who's doing a lot of work on that or work on themselves. Is there ever a point when you should just walk away and find somebody who wants to do the work with you?
Yeah, I think that point is different for everybody. Mm-hmm. Like I would never draw a line like an ultimatum. I mean, my ultimatum would be if there's physical abuse mm-hmm. or severe addictions, that you should be very, that's a great reason to really consider whether the relationship you're in or is good for you or not. I think a lot of problems can be like even infidelity. I've seen couples recover and come out stronger on the other side. I think that's also, it depends on the couple situation. Okay. It also depends on the stage of marriage, or not marriage, the stage of the relationship that you're in. If you're just dating and you've got somebody who refuses to show up for you, that's a great time to move on. But if you're in a committed long-term relationship and somebody like maybe they had a parent die and they're going through depression, or maybe they're going through like a big existential midlife crisis or something, maybe it would be better to be a little bit more patient. But I think my advice in that situation is typically when a relationship isn't going the way that we want, our instinct is to always blame our partner. But I promise you, the research shows that one person can change a relationship. And when your behavior changes, it puts pressure on your partner to have to adapt to those changes. And more often than not, your partner will make the decision. If you're showing up in a way that is good and that is contributing to the overall health of the relationship, and your partner is resisting that goodness and that contribution, they will opt out themselves the majority of the time if they don't want to be in it anymore. It won't even have to be your choice. But what happens is oftentimes we lower ourselves to the lowest common denominator. And if our partner is being like really demonstrating really poor behavior, we drop to their level and we meet them where they're at, and then we contribute more to the problem. Yeah. So learning, it goes back to that self-awareness and self-control, and learning to understand what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for, and how to create really clear boundaries and enforce them. And as you kind of learn those skills, it will always put pressure on your partner to either level up and meet you where you're at, or choose their way out of the relationship.
Well, thank you so much, Nate. This has been an amazing conversation. Let's go into our lightning round, right? As we wind up. Okay. So this part of the interview, I'm going to give you a prompt and I want you to tell me the first word that comes to mind. And we're sticking with our whole dream driving metaphor. Okay.
Do I have to say just one word or can I?
A phrase, whatever, like whatever comes to mind. Okay. The first word is park.
What your car's not doing or what your car's doing when you're not driving it.
Reverse.
Temporary move in the direction that you don't want to go.
Neutral.
Coasting.
Drive.
Destination in mind.
I like that. And if you want to be a dream driver, you have to have your keys to success. So tell me 3 things that you think every dream driver needs in their toolkit before they hit the road.
I think every extraordinary person has an extraordinary problem that they're trying to solve. So I think that's one big tool in your tool belt is to have a big problem that you want to solve. I think a good mentor is a great tool to have in your belt. And if you're an entrepreneur, I think you have to have something to sell. My good friend Brian Lofrumento says that you cannot be an entrepreneur unless you're selling something.
I like that. Big problem, a mentor, and something to sell. Who's somebody who's your mentor? How did you find your mentor along this journey?
My wife and I have recently come across a couple that we consider to be really dear friends of ours, and they have just kind of evolved into what I would consider to be our mentors. And it wasn't ever like an official, hey, will you be my mentor? It just kind of happened.
And those are the best sometimes, right? The ones that evolve into that relationship.
Yeah, but it started, I interviewed them for my podcast. And they gave me one of the most incredible interviews I had ever had.
Is it up yet?
Yeah, it's David and Gretchen Figge.
Okay. I'll link to it in the show notes.
They just blew me away, and I felt this immediate kinship with them. And I was like, okay, these people have something really special, and we just really jived, and we've gone to dinner a whole bunch of times, and we always we have real talk with each other. You know what I'm talking about? Like there's some people that you can talk about anything with them, and you don't even have to worry about it. And they have just always been the kind of people that I could have soul talk with. So they've just kind of evolved into our marriage and almost our life mentors, while also being some of our best friends. So,
and I know I could not let you go without asking you this, but what are some of your favorite books or resources that you would recommend to dream drivers who want to start working on this? And of course, let us know where we can find you online as well.
You can listen to the podcast at loveyoumentary.com. If you want to get the emails, I would go, I put a lot of effort into those, but you go to first7years.com, and I actually am putting together something special for your listeners. If they go to first7years.com/drive,
okay.
I'll give them a little something special that I don't give to anybody else.
And we'll link to that in the show notes as well.
Sweet. And as far as books are concerned, do you want more business or more relationship?
Things that you would recommend. Doesn't matter what type.
I think a really great book is The New Rules of Marriage by Terry Real. And whether or not you're in a relationship or you ever want to get married doesn't matter. This is a great book to read just to understand the dynamics of relationships and the expectations that we bring into them, and how if you want to have any sort of romance in your life, like there's a lot of expectations that we bring with us in the 21st century that we need to understand the dynamics of, that nobody before us could prepare us for, our parents or our grandparents. So that's a really interesting book. If you want to get psychological, really heady, there's a fantastic book that it's really dense, but it is so good. It's called Passionate Marriage by David Schnarch. And it took me a month and a half to read because I had to digest it 5 pages at a time, but it is so understanding human behavior and how we work. It's really interesting.
And a business book?
I would say something by the Arbinger Institute, either The Anatomy of Trust or Leadership and Self-Deception. One of those two. They're great leadership books about kind of your relationship inside the business space.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nate. This has been such a pleasure. I feel like our dream drivers are going to want to listen to this over and over and over, because I even want to go back and play and you just talked, right?
Oh, thank you so much. I am happy to come talk with you anytime. I love what you're up to, and I'm glad that I could come hang out with you for a little while.
Thank you. And I'm definitely going to link to our original Brand Makers interview. It's funny because I still have the audio for that too. So it would be interesting. Maybe I'll like do a little clip at the end, like a 30-second clip of what did Raina and Nate sound like 3 years ago.
I would love that. And it scares me to think about.
No, we were good back then. We were on the road to our greatness that we are now, right?
Yes. Step by step.
All right. So as I promised, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek into the previous interview that I did with Nate all the way back on February 6, 2015. This is just a snippet. I used to do this series on my blog called Brand Makers where I interviewed people and then I wrote up the interview. So you can actually go back. I have the links in the show notes. You can go back and read the full Brand Makers interview. But it was kind of fun to go back and get that audio and play around with it. And I like this clip. So please enjoy.
If you've got a young boy, like a little 5-year-old boy, who runs up and kisses his dad on the mouth and gives him a big hug, and the dad kisses him back and hugs him back and just says, I love you so much, you know? And then you compare that to the 5-year-old boy who runs up and kisses his dad and gives him a big hug, and his dad says, boys don't kiss. You know, boys don't hug each other. Boys don't kiss each other. Don't do that. That's not okay. But those two children are going to learn to express love or to create love differently in their lives because they've been exposed to different role models and examples.
So I really think that what you shared today can really help people think about, their own lives and how they can, pursue more fulfillment within their own people's personal lives. And that's something that I'm so excited to share. So I have to really get to work on this interview.
Okay. So this is a full wrap for episode 148 with Nate. I hope that you enjoyed hearing his dream driving journey as well as his keys to success. If you love this episode, if you loved it, please share it with a friend. The best way that you can share it with a friend is by tagging us on Instagram stories, tweeting about us, posting something on Facebook, texting someone. Make sure to use our handle. We are Dreams and Drive across the board. And you can also use the hashtag Dreams and Drive as well. Don't forget to enter our giveaway of the week. We are going to be giving away one copy of Steve Harvey's book, Jump. It has been amazing. I'm currently reading it, and I want to start sharing these things that I love with you all. So please, if you want to enter, go to dreamsanddrive.com/win to enter to win Steve Harvey's book, Jump. So let me just give you guys a quick rundown of everything that has been happening. This past weekend was just a blur. I hung out with episode 83 guest Mackenzie Dawkins for her birthday. Then I went to a Pod and Live New York City event that was hosted by T with Q and J. And that was an amazing event. Got to meet a lot of you guys who I haven't met in real life. So yes, Pod and Live NYC. Search that hashtag on Twitter or on Instagram if you want to get a recap of that. And then finally, I had a brand launch event with Ashley Langston, who has her own company that just launched, which is called Icon, and she makes fabulous, very luxurious bow ties. So it was an amazing opportunity to be able to go to that event. If you have not checked my sleigh picture that I posted on Instagram, please go to my personal Instagram page, RAINSHINELUV, and peep the photo because it was kind of hot, kind of fly. I am really trying to think about a way that I can have an event by June because I just feel like I kind of feel a little, not ashamed, but that's one of the things I would love to do, but I've just been super nervous. So if I had a New York City event, just a casual meetup, send me a message on whatever social media platform and let me know if you would come. NYC event, Dreams and Drive, would you come? Send me a DM and let me know. You guys know I love when you buy some merch. Right now, I have merchandise and templates available. So if you want to get a Dreams and Drive t-shirt, crew neck, or hoodie, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/shop and you can use the code DRIVER for 10% off. And if you want to check out my guest outreach and pitching email templates, you can also buy that there on the site as well. Please make sure to rate us and leave a review if you're on Apple Podcasts specifically. I really do appreciate all the reviews and all the feedbacks from you all. So keep doing it. And if you're not part of our Dreams and Drive Facebook group, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/Facebook or search Dream Driver Mastermind the next time you are logged on. If you enjoyed it, if Nate touched you in some way, if you feel inspired to go out there and claim extraordinary love for yourself, share this with a friend, pass it on, listen to it again. I really did enjoy speaking with Nate, and thank you so much for sharing your story with our dream drivers. All right, and so finally, next week's guest is going to be the fabulous Felicia Leatherwood. She is the hairstylist to many stars that you love, including Issa Rae. So, yes, that's going to be a fabulous episode. Keep dreaming, keep driving, and we'll chat again in episode 149. Bye, guys.